All right, well, thanks everybody, and perfect. Okay, well, as Chris said, I think we've got a small group today, so if we can make it a little bit interactive, we should have plenty of time for people to chime in and engage. But I'm excited to be here today with Dr. Scorza. So I'll just introduce myself first as the moderator. As I said earlier, my name is Calhoun with the Public Health Alliance of Southern California, but I have worked on a number of different food and nutrition related issues over the past several years in Southern California. So I'll try to kind of chime in a little bit with some of that. Right now I'm primarily focused on looking at the issue of food waste and how that is a health issue, in fact, and how we can, we generate a lot of food waste, which is bad for the environment, and also could be utilized to bring a lot of nutritious food to people. So there's a lot of benefits to addressing food waste. So that's what I'm currently focused on, but Dr. Scorza, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, let's try that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're such a small, intimate group, we might as well get comfortable. I am, again, Dr. D'Artagnan Scorza. I grew up in Inglewood, California, and had the fortune of having some amazing people in my life who ensured that I made it to a place like UCLA, where I was able to build sort of a deeper relationship between opportunity and privilege, as well as build the type of skills that were necessary to support my own community. And so while I was at UCLA, I took a brief break, went off and joined the Navy right after September 11th, served for almost 5 years, went around the world, went to Iraq, was actually on the ground in Baghdad, and then came back and said, okay, I'm good. I did my service, no more bombs for me, and came back to my community, and really came back with a deeper sense of purpose, and one that helped me understand how important it was to serve folk who looked like me, who went through experiences like me, and individuals who lacked opportunity. And so when I returned from Iraq, I went back to UCLA to finish my undergraduate degree, and then came back to my community to launch a program for young men, specifically African American males of color, to help improve literacy practices in urban schools. I went back to my alma mater, back to the high school I graduated from, and launched this program called the Black Male Youth Academy. And in working with those young folk, was able to help them graduate high school, pursue post-secondary education. 8 out of the young men that were in our first cohort not only graduated, but 5 made it to a 4-year, 2 made it to a 2-year, and 1 went to a vocational trade school, and said, okay, there's something about this that I want to continue to build upon. As we continue to do that work, began to engage our young folk in graduate level research. So we call that youth participatory action research, where our students went out and evaluated issues in the community and decided to address those issues. So they would approach policymakers and present their research. So that meant that they conducted surveys, they did ethnographic interviews, and did studies, and presented their findings to decision makers. And as a result, our young folk decided to focus on food and the ways in which food affected their lives and affected their environment. And as they began to do that work, we went around. I remember we went to City Hall, and the City Council was like, sorry, we don't have any land for you, but go talk to the school district. So the school district said, yeah, we do have this one little plot that's off in the community that we can let you all use. So then we decided they proposed a community garden for the school as a place to really address some of the challenges they were experiencing. And as a result, we launched the first community garden in our school. And from there, a larger initiative that focused on the food system emerged, where people in the community got really excited, started coming together, and we decided to launch 100 school community and home gardens. And instead of just building these gardens, we said, well, what do we do with all this food once we grow it? So we took that food and started aggregating it and created a community-supported agriculture program, a CSA program, where we not only partner with local farmers to supplement that box, but we also grow food from our community to make it affordable and make it accessible to residents. Beyond that, we said, okay, now we're growing food. What do people do with this food? What does a black person in Inglewood do with bok choy, right? So we decided to launch nutrition education classes and then launched community events that center people's understanding not only on food, but around the value of food and how we can use food to heal as well in our own lives, in our own communities, and our own spaces. And from there, the organization has grown, and we'll probably touch on some of those topics a little bit later. But by and large, we've been able to expand not only our work in food and food justice, but our work in education with young men of color throughout South Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, Long Beach, and as far as Sacramento, and are now beginning to expand our work nationally. And so it's an exciting time, given the conditions that we continue to see even at the federal level, but it's an exciting time for us at SGLI, and I'm very much looking forward to engaging in this conversation today.
Great, thank you.
And by the way, it's a pleasure to be on this panel with Holly, because Holly and I served on the California Food Policy Council together.
Right.
And I'm currently a board member for the LA Food Policy Council, and I've been engaged in a number of things around food, so it's good to see her again. And she didn't really tell you how amazing she is and all the amazing work she's been doing in the state for the past, 5-10 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, so we have a huge resource here, and I'm happy to be on this panel.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. D'Artagnan, a lot of the inspiration behind this event was public health, and so you've been talking a lot from the sort of social justice perspective. So how do you sort of see the bridge between justice and health?
Well, I think in many ways, and you all probably know this, right? Folk that lack choices, folk that lack opportunities have limited choices. And so we know that if there's an overwhelming amount of liquor stores and or fast food restaurants in a community, people are going to choose what's available to them. And that's going to lead to things like diet-related diseases. We have 47% of the young folk that we have in Inglewood, 47% of our young folk who did the fitnessgram were considered obese or overweight. On average, living in Inglewood compared to a more affluent community like Palos Verdes, we live 10 years less than our white counterparts. Right, we know that hypertension, right, is a significant challenge in our community. And even beyond that, things like lung disease and emphysema and asthma are issues that are exacerbated or conditions that are exacerbated because of where we live and the proximity of our communities relative to freeways and the airport and some of the other high transit oriented systems that we're around. And so it's a public health issue because ultimately our lives are on the line. But I'll go so far as to say that my grandmother doesn't think about it that way, or on my dad's side. My grandmother doesn't think about it that way. She, says, sweetheart, I'm not feeling well today. I have a headache. I feel dehydrated, right? She didn't have access to, people don't trust the water, right? They're like, we're not going to drink that tap water. And so I need to go, can you go to the store and give me a bottle of water so I can drink? So she waits until, she's not feeling well to get some water, right? And so the way folk think about it and experience these issues is on a very personal level. When she gets heat stroke, or if she gets heat stroke, that's a public health issue, right? That's an environmental equity issue. That's a health equity issue. And so that's how we very much approach and frame this work within our own community.
That's great. And I'll just add for a moment. So as I mentioned, I work with the Public Health Alliance of Southern California, and we have a health equity frame built within all of our work. And I think for those of us who maybe come at this from more of the public health side than the social justice side, I think that framework can be a really helpful way of really grounding everything you do, because once you start embracing that way of thinking, they sort of become inseparable. Health and justice, you need to have them both, right, hand in hand. Can you also talk, I guess, a little bit about some of the partners that you work with and how different partnerships are important to your work?
Absolutely. I think no one's an island, so I'll just start by saying that. But we are able to be successful in our work because we do have deep relationships with multiple institutions. So, for example, we are a Champions for Change grantee for LA County Department of Public Health, which is funded, as you all know, by the California Department of Public Health, which is also funded by USDA, right? We have partnered with local businesses. We launched a farmer's market in Inglewood September of 2015, and now we're almost 2 years in, and we're excited about it. and have had, worked with 30 of the businesses in the downtown Inglewood area to help make sure that that market was going to be viable, and to also make sure that their local businesses were viable. We've been able to partner with other community-based organizations, the Latino Coalition for Healthy California, LCHC, Community Health Council, which is in South LA, Community Services Unlimited, which is another food justice-centered organization in South Los Angeles that grows food for young folk and provides their own CSA. We've been able to do this work in partnership with people that are values aligned, that understand these equity issues, right? So we know that there are racial justice concerns that many of our communities have, because often African American, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander communities are most adversely affected by these material conditions that are associated with concentrated disadvantages. So you're going to get to talk about poverty later on today, but we look at poverty as, or rather we look at the lack of economic opportunity or economic vulnerability as being something that's centered in certain communities. And whenever you concentrate economic vulnerability, you also concentrate disadvantage. When you concentrate disadvantage, you find that you see things like higher rates of crime, poor school investment or poor school quality, drugs, etc. So whenever you concentrate disadvantage, you see all of these adverse effects within a community. And often that exacerbates some of the other racial justice and equity issues that we're facing. And so, by and large, partnerships allow us to tackle those issues and tackle these issues from a multi-sectoral and multidimensional approach. So we might be focused on nutrition education and advocacy work, but my colleague over here may be focused on systems change efforts and policy change, right? And so I think being able to couple and link those relationships in very strategic and thoughtful ways allows us to be more effective and have this sort of collective impact strategy. Hence the emergence of organizations like the Los Angeles Food Policy Council or a Food Systems Alliance, or you name your group in your city or your town that comes together to address these issues collectively and collaboratively.
That's great, and I'm glad you mentioned also the food policy councils or system alliances. They can be called sort of a number of different things, but I think most of the communities across Southern California have some group like that, and it really is a good place to engage with, to get involved in issues, and a lot of those plug in with the California Food Policy Council if you want to get involved in some statewide issues. I also just want to, since we have a little bit of time, add another potential partner could be healthcare organizations. So a lot of like the nonprofit hospitals, for example, have to do a community health needs assessment I think it's every 3 years or something like that. And it's actually, last year was clarified through the IRS that part of their allowable expenditures are around meeting adequate nutrition access in communities. So they are required to engage the community in the process of determining the needs and then setting an implementation plan. It's not really specified how they have to do that, but you as people engaged in the community should make sure you're at that table so that you're able to drive that process and make sure that some of those community benefit dollars that are funding different initiatives throughout the community can be put toward the priorities that you and other community members see. So that's another one that we don't always talk about as much, to just throw out there. And
are we allowed to ask?
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so delighted to meet you. I think I've been your groupie for a while. Since PolicyLink did that tour and I got to go to SJLI, I've been like enamored by the organization. You do such amazing work, honestly. And I have a lot of family buried at Inglewood Cemetery, so I always kind of like secretly hope I run into someone from there, or like look around, see if anybody's there if you go and visit. When I go and visit my ancestors. And so I just wanted to that your work extends beyond LA, and I would love to have you come to UC Irvine and talk to my students.
We'd be more than happy to do that. And
that would be amazing.
Sarah Chang is here as well. She's
Yeah,
our policy systems and environmental change strategist. And so
I would love that.
Yeah.
My question is about partnerships. How important for your organization is it to partner with non-health and non-justice focused organizations? Because I think one of the challenges we have is the intersectionalityness, I don't know how to say the word I'm thinking of, that is needed to do this work because it's so systems based. We have to engage with the housing sector and the transportation sector, and I'm just wondering, how does that look with your organization, and I'm a little nervous because seriously, I'm your groupie. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No need to be nervous. I can definitely answer that question. So, we look at this, I'm here to talk about food justice, but food justice is not all we do at SGLI, and Sarah can probably tell you this in detail. We focus on, for us, education is the through line in everything we do, right? And helping to ensure that folk are educated and have the skills they need to mobilize within the community to solve whatever the issues are that they've identified are really critical for us. And in particular, and you raised housing, and that's a perfect example. In particular, we recognize that we could do all of this work to improve conditions in our community, but if people cannot afford to stay and they're displaced, then ultimately it's for naught. Right? So displacement, for example, has become a significant challenge for us there in Inglewood and in South LA more broadly. And as a result, we've partnered with and are now supporting a local coalition called Uplift Inglewood, which is focused on passing a rent stabilization ordinance. And they're focused on passing passing inclusionary zoning policies. We're resourcing, we're funding, I'm a resident in Inglewood. But this is a coalition of community residents that have come together to help push forward these issues, but are also simultaneously demanding that we improve the environment, right? And that we strengthen access to green spaces, that we provide spaces for community gardens and urban agriculture in the midst of all this development, and not just bringing in a stadium, as you may have heard, with the Rams coming to Southern California, to Los Angeles, they're located in Inglewood. And so, we have folk in our community that are out there organizing and using strategies around community organizing to challenge dominant systems. We also partner with, I mentioned our farmers market. We've also partnered with local farmers so that they can come and provide access and make access a strategic, make this farmers market a strategic access point for residents who typically would not have access to fresh fruits and veggies, or if they went to the neighborhood store, it's really bad food, right, that they get. And so often we've sent these pictures in to our assembly folk, we've sent them into our state centers, and they've talked to the California Department of Public Health about some of the grocery stores. You may have even heard some of these stories in South LA, how a grocery store has rotting food on the shelves and there's rats under the fridges and stuff that you would never see in Beverly Hills is allowed to take place in a place like South LA or even in Inglewood. And so we have to work with industry, and we have to work with farmers, and we have to work with residents and even our city government to pass ordinances that it allowed for a farmers market in order to make this work possible. We cannot operate in silos, and as a result, we do not. And I'll close by saying, I'll finish responding by saying this. One of our young folk, when we were doing a lot of this organizing work, Orlando said to me, Dr. Scorza, why should we do all this improvement if all that happens when we improve our community is that we get kicked out anyway, right? And so he said, we're going to make this all better, and somebody else is going to come in and take it over. And you know what? He had a tremendous, that's a great point, right? And so my response to him was, because this is your home, right? And not only is this your home, but ultimately our collective power is what makes it possible for us to improve the conditions here and also make sure that we can benefit from improved conditions, right? If you divest from the idea that you can use your power to help stay here and make it better, then it won't happen, right? You will get displaced. Never mind the economic challenges that they're facing, but notwithstanding the economic challenges that our young folk are facing. But investing in a place-based approach to improving our community allows us to have conversations with the city government about economic opportunity and jobs and business incubation programs, about home ownership programs, about economic development that has local hiring policies, about Section 8 housing and housing vouchers for these young folk that are seeking opportunities so they can stay in their own community, etc. It opens up and broadens the conversation, and food becomes just one part of that.
See, now our drawing is group.
No,
Are there, because this is a small group, are there other questions from the audience? No? Okay. Well,
in our community, in Orange County, food justice sort of starts with a upper class kind of perspective. And so it's been real interesting to see how the food movement, how do we engage low-income populations? Because it's, you know, it's chic, it's, you know, they all want organic, they all want, and they can afford it. And our farmers markets for years were more expensive than any grocery store you could go into because it was specialty fruit, specialty vegetable. It was, you know, that kind of thing. And they sort of owned food. And so how do we move that conversation to be more inclusive?
So, what's the relationship between some of those communities that are doing that work in very affluent areas and places like Tustin?
Well, we don't work together all. I mean, I think the people that do Food Access Coalition do, but and they work with the California Food Policy Council, and they're involved in them. But we've really struggled. We don't really have a good viable farmers market network. I mean, we probably have a much better ethnic market network. So maybe not all the models really reflect in different suburban environments, and maybe we need to look at partnering with ethnic markets as opposed to farmers markets and get farmers into those markets. I'm just thinking that we've been trying to impose the farmer market model in Orange County, and it doesn't work.
Well, I think in many ways, so I have colleagues in Ojai that have asked me a very similar question. They said, D'Artagnan, how do we do this work in Ojai? And Ojai is a fairly affluent community. And I said, well, do you have the need? Right? Where's the need? Right? I think I think the need drives where the work can head as it relates to these justice issues. I think there's also, I mean, here's the thing. I don't disagree with charging a lot of money at a farmer's market because local small farmers, if people can afford to pay for it, that's actually a good thing for the farmer, right? It keeps the farmer sustainable, it keeps them viable, especially if they're an organic farmer. A lot of small farmers and family farms.
But it doesn't meet our low-income population's needs.
Right.
They can't afford it.
So then I think the alternative, and this is where you, I think, can have some leverage, is in working with those farmers market managers, ensure that they know that a condition, so for example, a condition of, CLA does this pretty well. So they'll say, if you want to be a West Hollywood farmer, you must also sell in this space at this location, right? So you use your purchasing power to influence the vendor so that they do serve a population, but serves that population at least at a price point that makes it accessible for them, right? And so CLA does a really good job of making sure that their West Hollywood vendors are able to serve both Watts and Baldwin Hills, and at least until the market becomes a viable, you know, space and place for them until it becomes viable and operational, fully operational, the CLA operations are able to help support and subsidize some of the access points for economically vulnerable and economically challenged
And I
communities.
know they're using market match, and that's one of the ways that they're trying to leverage the dollars for low-income populations to have more access to the foods in farmers markets. But have you worked with ethnic markets at all as a strategy for, because that's where they shop. That's where our ethnic population shop. The API population has a whole network. The Latino population has a whole network of affordable markets where they shop.
Yeah, we actually, so in Inglewood specifically, we even have roaming markets, right? This is how it was when I grew up in Watson, Inglewood. There would be these trucks that would come down the street and you can purchase off the back of the truck. Do you remember? Did you see that? Yeah. So,
but they haven't been really positive in nutritional environments in the
Okay.
past.
well, I would say for us, they provide, you know, fresh fruits and veggies and make it possible for residents in our community to actually go out and shop. So there's specific places they park in the community as sort of these mobile markets. And then we have a group of, you know, they're not bodegas, but carnicerias and others, and even local stores that folk like the LA Food Policy Council have been working with to help convert into healthier spaces as well. The carnicerias, for the most part, offer pretty good food or affordable food, but a lot of the liquor stores do not, right? And so I think part of it is in converting those liquor stores. But as it relates to some of the ethnic markets, we know that communities focus on their food and cultural practices, right? So there may be some opportunity to figure out where those people who are interested in food justice can help provide access to capital for those markets to grow. They can help provide access to land or space for those, so those markets can continue to thrive, and ensure that there's sort of an economic viability component associated with those spaces as well. And so often what I find in working with those markets is that they stay small, and they typically stay small because they don't have the resources they need to grow and expand to serve more people in that population. So they're, go ahead, sorry.
No, please. I was just thinking there's something that you mentioned too that globally I would call it food sovereignty, where you started to grow the food and you partnered with the farmers markets to go and distribute it, or local farmers, sorry, to go and distribute it, so it keeps the cost down. So it could be that, for example, the kid works, the youth that want to do community gardens or community farms, that it's a way to have, it's a sovereign thing, you know, it's about going beyond food justice to say we're going to be in control of growing our own food as part of an economic opportunity as well. I feel like that's something that you mentioned that could be, there could be a piece of it,
That's
like
right.
to compete with the local farmers, but bring it together in a way that's more empowering for the community and they have more control over it.
That's absolutely right, and I think that's a critical strategy. So facilitating food sovereignty, and again, being able to use the power and the privilege you have to provide access to resources is essentially where I think you can leverage a lot of support for those types of operations. And so my colleague up in Washington, Sarahita Wyatt, does this very well with Viva Farms. So she helps local farmers or small farmers grow their farms by providing access to capital from multiple sources, USDA, etc., and then ensuring that that food gets to market, right? So if there's land that you know people can access where they can grow food locally, I know you all out in Orange County have A.G. Kamamores. He has this huge farm, right? Making sure that maybe people in those spaces are able to, you know, access opportunities to work on a farm like that, or even just grow their own food in their own community so they can sell back to those farmers markets could be a great strategy as well for facilitating justice. Because I'm almost certain all those chic people will be like, ooh, I'm buying food from a local
Right.
farmer that's X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
It's a great story to tell. Give them a story to tell. You know, I don't ding people for having more money, right? But I think that on the other hand, when you have more money, you have more access, you have more privilege, you still have a responsibility to help ensure that others can benefit as well, right? And it's not you know, mine and mine alone, but it's us because we're all in this together. So I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Well, actually, economically, I think they're very successful, the ethnic markets in Orange County. They're very large. The Gonzales and all of the Northgate markets are in LA,
Right.
and I think what we could do is potentially move them to understand their responsibility to where they're making money. And I think there's some opportunity with Gonzalez family and some push for them to be part of that. But there are other groups that I don't think we've quite tapped on. As they become successful, do they just move them up and forget that their success is based on the communities that they serve? So I think we also need to look at those institutions and not have them replicate what the other large markets
Right.
did, but that to become not just successful, but then involved in their community in other ways. So.
Well, and I know a lot of the public health will partner with some of the different markets to do cooking demos and nutritional outreach to community members, and that could, on top of I mean, that could be one way of building that community relationship, where then when they do become successful, they're really grounded in the success of the people around them too. And I think also with the Market Match program that you mentioned with farmers markets, there are opportunities to expand that also into brick and mortar settings as well. And
they're doing that. San Diego's doing that pilot project right now to see.
yeah, so that could be another opportunity. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of farmers markets, but they do tend to have limited hours, and they're once a week. It's not generally going to solve all the food needs for an individual, so it is important. We've got just a couple more minutes, so I think you've touched on some of the different sort of leverage points in your community. If you could just talk a little bit more about some of the leverage points in the region where people could engage to address some of these issues, and then also kind of just wrap us up with your ultimate vision for what success looks like in your community.
So thinking regionally, I think, well, so we've talked about this, right? So perhaps looking at the relationship between water and agriculture and the ways in which it will influence the future of our food system. Because we just got released from this emergency drought declaration, we're probably less concerned about, what that means. But this is an ongoing issue for our farmers. And so thinking about strategies around food production and the relationship between local farmers or farmers in general and water, I think is going to be really, really important. And there are a lot of conversations that are taking place in that regard. And so if you look at the water bond that was passed, Proposition 1, there's funding in the diverse and the disadvantaged communities portfolio to help communities do some planning, regional planning around these issues as well. Through the, I think it's AB, was it 2272, the Transformative Climate Communities Challenge or whatnot, or grant, that was actually a bill passed by our Assemblywoman Autumn Burke. There's regional funding opportunities to do some planning around environmental sustainability as well. So when we think about food, we think about the health in the built environment, right? So how can we grow food in an urban agricultural space and on land that's available in our communities, but how can we also ensure that the way in which we build our environment facilitates a healthier lifestyle? So where can we increase bikeability, walkability? How can we make sure that a mother with her 2 kids who needs to go grocery shopping can actually get to the store in the first place, right? Because a 2 or 3 mile journey to the store with no car is actually really difficult to do. So I don't know if you've all ever tried it, but I used to do that with my grandmother growing up, and back then at least we had baskets that we could push down the street, right? So everyone would be we walked home with a basket and then I'd have to walk back with the basket, right? Or we'd keep it, and then when we walk back to the store the next time, we would take it back. So that was a way for us to get food home. We don't have those opportunities anymore. And I think it's a really important conversation for us to have. There are also policy opportunities that continue to emerge around issues like sugary sweetened beverages as well. And Holly, you can probably speak to some of the other regional policy issues as well. But we passed, Assemblymember Ting passed AB 551 a few years ago. It's getting ready to sunset. And so there may be an opportunity to help push for the renewal of legislation that provides for tax incentives for private landowners to allow farm operators in urban spaces to grow food at a, where they get this benefit in their own local community to a tax benefit instead of sitting on that land. And so, and if you're a property owner, being able to have your taxes reduced, to the irrigated lands rate is a significant benefit in an urban community and urban space. So it's thinking strategically, I think thinking outside the box, and then connecting to some of these policy and advocacy issues or these systems change efforts that organizations are engaged in.
And success, what is success?
It's interesting. Success would look like us not having to have this conversation. I mean, that's really it, right? Like, not necessarily I used to say put ourselves out of business. I don't believe, I think, let me go focus on climate change, right? Success would be us not having to talk about equity issues in the food system. Or if we're talking about equity issues in the food system, it would be seeing significant radical change and seeing improved outcomes along the way as we begin to get closer and closer towards changes in people's lives. I don't believe that we're ever going to achieve aha, right? There's no major solution, there's no silver bullet, but at least there can be these collective impact approaches that allow us to transform conditions. And I will say that just the work that we're doing throughout the state, and probably the work that you all are engaged in, has been transformative over the past 5 to 6 years, at least from my vantage point. But for us in our community, the material conditions must radically change, right? The the price point at which people are able to access fresh fruits and veggies needs to be affordable for families. Or wages need to go up so that they can afford to purchase that. Like, there has to be some opportunity, there has to be a meeting point where this makes sense for people economically. And I think often in these food justice conversations, we're not talking about the economics of the food system. We're not talking about it, right? We're not talking about how these large monocropping farms actually can make a lot of money and keep themselves in business to provide food for the world, even though we're wasting 40% of that food, right? So we have to have that conversation too, right? And yes, it's about respecting the land. Yes, it's about respecting the people. But we don't start focusing on the ways in which people can, access good food in an affordable manner, in a far more, I think, pointed, we talk about affordability, but a far more sort of pointed and strategic and analytical way. I think we're going to continue to spin our wheels on this. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
That's excellent, and I think we're at time.
Okay.
Thank
Well, thank you all.
you.